The United States military presence in Greenland didn't start with headlines or official announcements. It started with a quiet agreement in 1941, and by the time most people heard about it, Greenland had already become one of the most strategic fortresses in the Western world. What happened in the decades that followed transformed this massive Arctic island into something few outsiders fully understand: a network of radar stations, missile warning systems, and underground facilities built not just to monitor the Arctic, but to control it. And here's what almost nobody realizes. This fortress was constructed largely in secret, piece by piece, without the kind of media attention you'd expect for one of the most important military installations on the planet. By the end of this video, you'll never look at Greenland the same way again. Most people think of Greenland as just ice. They see it on maps, notice it's huge, maybe wonder why Denmark owns it, and move on. But the United States saw something else entirely. They saw the top of the world. They saw the shortest route between North America and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. They saw thousands of miles of coastline that could hide submarines. They saw an island so remote that entire military operations could be conducted without public scrutiny. And they saw an opportunity that geopolitical rivals couldn't afford to miss. So the Americans didn't just build a single base. They built an entire strategic network, and they did it so quietly that even today, most Greenland residents don't know the full extent of what exists beneath the ice. It began during World War II, when Nazi Germany occupied Denmark, and suddenly Greenland's colonial status became a problem. The United States couldn't let Germany establish a foothold in the Arctic. So in April 1941, before America had even entered the war, Washington signed a defense agreement with the Danish ambassador. The treaty allowed the United States to build military bases anywhere in Greenland. The Danes in Copenhagen, under occupation, didn't even know the agreement existed until after the war ended. That's how fast and how quietly it happened. American forces moved in immediately, establishing weather stations and airstrips across the island. These weren't just observation posts. They were strategic assets designed to monitor German U-boats, track weather patterns that would affect Allied operations in Europe, and prepare for something much bigger. After the war ended, most countries dismantled their temporary bases. The United States did not. Instead, Washington renegotiated with Denmark in 1946, and then again in 1951, securing permanent rights to operate military installations in Greenland. The official reason was Cold War defense. The real reason was geography. Greenland sits almost exactly between the United States and Russia. The shortest flight path for a Soviet bomber targeting New York or Washington would cross directly over Greenland. Similarly, American bombers heading to Moscow would follow the same Arctic route. Whoever controlled Greenland controlled the skies above the top of the world. This wasn't theoretical. This was the entire logic of nuclear deterrence in the 1950s and 60s. So the Americans built Thule Air Base. Construction began in 1951 on Greenland's northwest coast, barely 750 miles from the North Pole. The base was enormous, requiring the forced relocation of an entire Inuit community that had lived in the area for generations. The villagers were given 4 days' notice. They were moved 80 miles north to a settlement called Qaanaaq, where conditions were harsher and resources scarcer. This displacement would later become one of the most controversial aspects of the American presence, sparking lawsuits and protests that continue even today. But in 1951, the Cold War took precedence over indigenous rights, and the base was constructed with ruthless efficiency. Thule became the centerpiece of America's Arctic fortress. At its peak, it housed more than 10,000 military personnel. It had its own power plant, water treatment facility, housing complexes, movie theaters, and even a bowling alley. It wasn't just a military outpost. It was a small American city, transplanted to one of the most hostile environments on Earth. But here's the part most people don't know. Thule was just the visible part of a much larger operation. Beneath the surface, literally, the United States was building something far more ambitious. In 1959, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers launched a classified project called Camp Century. The official description was innocuous: a research facility to study Arctic construction techniques under the ice sheet. The reality was something out of science fiction. Engineers dug tunnels deep into the Greenland ice cap, carving out a network of underground chambers powered by a portable nuclear reactor. Yes, a nuclear reactor buried in the ice. The facility was designed to house 200 soldiers and could theoretically operate for years without resupply from the surface. The tunnels stretched for miles, with separate sections for living quarters, laboratories, storage, and command centers. It was an entire military base hidden beneath the ice. But Camp Century wasn't built just for research. Declassified documents later revealed that the true purpose was something called Project Iceworm, a plan to deploy hundreds of nuclear missiles beneath the Greenland ice sheet. The missiles would be mounted on mobile platforms, moving constantly through the tunnels to avoid detection by Soviet satellites. It was a brilliant and terrifying concept, an invisible nuclear arsenal hidden under the Arctic, impossible to target, impossible to destroy. If the Cold War ever went hot, Greenland's ice would become the launchpad for World War III. Project Iceworm was eventually abandoned. The ice moved faster than engineers anticipated, crushing the tunnels and making long-term habitation impossible. The nuclear reactor was removed in 1964, and Camp Century was decommissioned by 1967. But the infrastructure didn't disappear. The tunnels are still there, buried deeper now under decades of accumulated snowfall. And in recent years, climate scientists have raised a disturbing possibility. As Greenland's ice sheet melts due to global warming, the abandoned military waste from Camp Century, including radioactive material and chemical pollutants, could be released into the environment. The United States built a fortress in the ice, and now the ice is melting. Meanwhile, above ground, Thule Air Base continued expanding. In the 1960s, it became part of the Ballistic Missile Early Warning System, a network of radar installations designed to detect incoming Soviet missiles. The radar domes at Thule could track objects thousands of miles away, providing critical minutes of warning in the event of a nuclear strike. This made Thule not just a military base, but a tripwire for global annihilation. If those radars detected a launch, the entire American nuclear arsenal would go on alert. One malfunction, one misreading, one technical glitch could trigger the end of the world. And it nearly did. On January 21, 1968, a B-52 bomber carrying 4 hydrogen bombs crashed near Thule Air Base. The aircraft was part of Operation Chrome Dome, a Cold War program in which nuclear-armed bombers flew continuous patrols near Soviet airspace, ready to retaliate if America was attacked. One of the bombers caught fire and crashed onto the sea ice just 7 miles from Thule. The conventional explosives in the bombs detonated on impact, scattering radioactive plutonium across the ice. It was one of the worst nuclear accidents in history, and it happened in one of the most remote places on Earth. The crash site was cleaned up, but studies later suggested that one of the 4 bombs was never recovered. To this day, some believe a live hydrogen bomb remains buried somewhere beneath the ice near Thule. The accident didn't slow the military buildup. If anything, it reinforced the strategic importance of Greenland. The Americans upgraded the radar systems, expanded the runways, and integrated Thule into the global missile defense network. Today, Thule Air Base is home to the most advanced space surveillance system in the world, tracking satellites, debris, and potential threats in orbit. It's also a key component of the U.S. Space Force, monitoring everything that moves above the Arctic Circle. Greenland isn't just watching the skies anymore. It's watching space. But here's where the story gets even more complex. Denmark technically owns Greenland, but since 2009, Greenland has been a self-governing territory within the Kingdom of Denmark. The Greenlandic government controls most domestic policies, but Denmark still handles foreign affairs and defense. That means Greenland itself has almost no say in the American military presence. The bases were negotiated between Washington and Copenhagen, often without consulting the Greenlandic people. This has created decades of tension. Many Greenlanders view the bases as colonial impositions, symbols of a time when their island was treated as a strategic asset rather than a homeland. Others see the economic benefits, the jobs and infrastructure that come with hosting a superpower's military. And now, in the 21st century, the geopolitical stakes are rising again. Climate change is opening up the Arctic like never before. The ice that once made Greenland nearly inaccessible is melting, revealing vast reserves of rare earth minerals, oil, and gas. Shipping routes that were frozen for centuries are becoming navigable. China has declared itself a near-Arctic state and is investing heavily in Greenland's mining sector. Russia is expanding its Arctic military infrastructure, building new bases and deploying icebreakers. The United States is watching all of this with intense concern, because whoever controls Greenland controls access to the Arctic, and the Arctic is the new frontier of global competition. In 2019, reports surfaced that President Trump had inquired about purchasing Greenland from Denmark. The idea was dismissed as absurd, but it reflected a deeper strategic anxiety. Greenland isn't just a cold island anymore. It's a resource hub, a military staging ground, and a gateway to one of the least explored regions on Earth. The United States has been fortifying Greenland for more than 80 years, and there's no indication that will change. If anything, the buildup is accelerating. Today, Thule Air Base remains operational with a permanent staff of around 600 personnel. The radar installations have been upgraded multiple times, and new satellite tracking systems are being installed as part of the U.S. Missile Defense Program. The base is also a critical node in Arctic surveillance, monitoring Russian and Chinese activity in the region. Meanwhile, Denmark is under pressure from Washington to limit Chinese investment in Greenland, particularly in telecommunications and mining. The fear is that Chinese companies could use commercial projects as cover for intelligence gathering or strategic positioning. Greenland, once again, is caught in the middle of a superpower rivalry. And yet, most of this happens without headlines. There are no dramatic announcements, no public debates, no front-page stories about the militarization of the Arctic. The fortress in Greenland was built quietly, expanded quietly, and continues to operate quietly. The people who live there see the planes coming and going, the radar domes on the horizon, the restricted zones they're not allowed to enter. But the full scale of the American presence, the history of secret projects and nuclear accidents and geopolitical maneuvering remains largely hidden from public view. So why does this matter? Because Greenland is no longer a remote curiosity. It's a flashpoint. The same geographic advantages that made it valuable during World War II and the Cold War make it indispensable in the emerging Arctic competition. The United States turned Greenland into a strategic fortress, not because of what it is, but because of where it is. And as the ice melts and the world's attention turns north, that fortress is only going to become more important. If you found this deep dive into hidden geopolitical strategy compelling, consider subscribing for more content that uncovers the stories maps don't tell. Hit like if this changed how you see Greenland, and drop a comment answering this. Do you think Greenland will become more strategically important than Europe or Asia in the next 50 years? There's a link in the description with sources and further reading on Arctic geopolitics, Cold War history, and the future of Greenland. The United States didn't build this fortress for the past. They built it for whatever comes next. And now you know why.